Right now, about 400 kilometers above your head, there are people living inside a metal tube hurtling around the Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. Between them and the void is a wall thinner than your front door. If that wall disappeared, if a seal failed, if an astronaut stepped outside without a suit, what would happen to the human body is nothing like what the movies show. There would be no instant freezing, no dramatic explosion, no blood boiling out of the skin in a crimson cloud. The truth is stranger, more clinical, and in its own way, far more disturbing. This is the second-by-second story of what space actually does to an unprotected human being. Let's start by killing the most famous myth: you would not explode. Hollywood loves this image, a body bursting like a balloon the moment it hits vacuum. It's wrong. Human skin is far tougher and more elastic than people give it credit for. It stretches, it contains, it holds. Experiments with animals in vacuum chambers and one terrifying accident with a human test subject have shown the same thing. The body swells, significantly, but it does not rupture. You would bloat, perhaps to twice your normal volume in some areas, as gases inside your tissues expand. But your skin would hold, you would look grotesque, you would not pop. So what actually happens in the first 5 seconds? The moment you're exposed to the vacuum, the air in your lungs rushes out, not gently, violently. If you make the mistake of holding your breath, the pressure difference will rupture your lungs almost instantly, the same injury that kills scuba divers who ascend too fast. The correct survival instinct, if you could call anything about this situation survivable, is to exhale. Let the air go. Because the air is leaving whether you cooperate or not, and the only question is whether it tears tissue on the way out. Within the same few seconds, something called ebullition begins. This is the detail that sounds like science fiction, but is pure physics. At sea level, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. But boiling point depends on pressure. Reduce the pressure to near zero, and water boils at body temperature, at 37 degrees, the temperature you are right now. The fluids in your soft tissues, your saliva, the moisture on your tongue, the thin film coating your eyes, all of it begins to boil. Not because it's hot, because there's nothing pushing down on it anymore. Your blood, deep inside your veins, is somewhat protected by the elasticity of your circulatory system, but the exposed surfaces of your body become a landscape of gently bubbling fluid. Astronaut Jim LeBlanc experienced a version of this in 1966, when his pressure suit failed during a vacuum chamber test at NASA. The last thing he remembered before losing consciousness was the saliva boiling off his tongue. He survived because technicians repressurized the chamber in about 30 seconds. He remains one of the only humans to have felt the vacuum and lived to describe it. Now, the clock hits 10 seconds. You are still alive. Your heart is still beating. Your brain is still processing. But you are losing consciousness fast. Not because of cold, not because of pain, but because of something called hypoxia. With no air pressure around you, the oxygen in your blood begins to do something counterintuitive. Instead of being delivered to your cells, it starts flowing the wrong way, out of your blood and into your empty lungs, then out into the void. Your blood is being deoxygenated in reverse. The brain, which consumes more oxygen than any other organ, notices almost immediately. Your vision narrows, your thoughts blur. Within 10 to 15 seconds, you black out. This is the window, 15 seconds of useful consciousness. After that, you are unconscious but technically still alive, drifting in a void you can no longer perceive. Between 15 seconds and about 90 seconds, the body is in a strange twilight. The heart continues to beat, growing weaker and more erratic as oxygen depletes. The swelling increases. Circulation begins to fail as gas bubbles form in the blood, a condition similar to the bends in deep-sea diving, but far more severe. Water vapor continues to sublimate from exposed skin and mucous membranes. Your mouth, your eyes, your nasal passages are all losing moisture directly into the vacuum. The surface of your skin cools, but slowly, because space is not cold the way a freezer is cold. There is no air to conduct heat away from your body. The only cooling mechanism is radiation and evaporation, both far slower than convection. You would not freeze for hours, possibly longer. In the vacuum, you are not burning and you are not freezing. You are somewhere in between, in a thermal limbo that has no equivalent on Earth. At roughly the 90-second mark, the damage becomes irreversible. Animal studies from the early space program, grim but essential experiments conducted in the 1960s, showed that dogs and chimpanzees exposed to near-vacuum conditions could be revived with no lasting injury if repressurized within 60 to 90 seconds. Beyond that window, survival dropped sharply. The circulatory system collapses. The brain suffers permanent damage. The heart, starved of oxygen and fighting against gas-filled blood vessels, enters arrhythmia and then stops. At some point, perhaps 2 minutes in, perhaps 3, the line between alive and dead is crossed. Not with a dramatic final moment, but with a quiet, invisible failure of systems that simply cannot run without the atmosphere they evolved inside. And then comes the strangest part of all. What happens to the body after death? On Earth, decomposition begins almost immediately, driven by bacteria and oxygen. In space, neither of those is present. An unprotected body in the vacuum would not rot, it would mummify. Moisture would slowly sublimate away, freezing and evaporating in an endless cycle driven by exposure to sunlight and shadow. Over weeks and months, the body would desiccate, becoming something closer to a freeze-dried specimen than a corpse in any earthly sense of the word. In the shadow of a spacecraft, temperatures drop to -150 degrees. In direct sunlight, they soar above 120 degrees. The body would cycle between these extremes, each pass driving off more moisture, until what remains is a dry, preserved shell that could, in theory, drift through space for millions of years without significantly changing. If the body is near a planet or a moon with an atmosphere, the story ends differently. It becomes a meteor. Entering an atmosphere at orbital velocity, thousands of meters per second, the body would heat, compress, and burn, consumed in the same streak of light that people on the ground call a shooting star. There would be nothing left. No bone, no trace, no evidence, no remains. A human being, an entire life of memories and experience, reduced to a flash of ionized gas 60 kilometers above someone making a wish. This is not entirely hypothetical. Space agencies have quietly grappled with the question of what to do with a body in space since the beginning of human spaceflight. NASA has protocols, though they are rarely discussed publicly. The ISS has no morgue, no body bag designed for zero gravity, no dignified procedure for a scenario that everyone hopes will never arise. The unofficial plan, acknowledged in interviews by astronauts and flight surgeons, is pragmatic and unsettling. The body would likely be placed in a spare spacesuit or sealed in a compartment, kept cold, and returned to Earth at the earliest opportunity. If return is impossible, if the mission is deep space, Mars-bound, months from home, the options narrow to storage in the coldest available section of the spacecraft, or in the most extreme scenario, release into the void. We built our bodies on a planet with a thick blanket of atmosphere pressing down on every square centimeter of skin, and we so rarely think about that pressure because it never stops. It took the space program to reveal just how precisely calibrated we are to this world, and how quickly everything unravels the moment that blanket is removed. 15 seconds. That's all the void gives you. 15 seconds to understand that the distance between you and eternity was never the thickness of a spacecraft hull. It was the thin, invisible ocean of air you've been breathing, without a single moment of gratitude, since the moment you were born. But the vacuum of space isn't the only place where things vanish in ways nobody expects. Back on Earth, every year, thousands of stores close their doors for the last time. The shelves are still full, the stockrooms are packed. Millions of dollars in perfectly good merchandise sits there with nowhere to go. What happens next is a journey stranger than most people imagine, through liquidators, landfills, and a hidden economy where brand new products are sold by the truckload to people you've never heard of. That story is next, and if you don't want to miss it, you know what to do.